There is a reason the old prayers no longer seem to work the way they once did. It is not because God stopped listening, and it is not because your faith failed. It is because what once sustained, you can no longer contain where God is taking you. The methods that worked in earlier seasons were designed for who you were then, not for who you are becoming now. Growth requires new language, new posture, and new movement, and God will intentionally allow familiar strategies to lose effectiveness so you are forced to seek Him at a deeper level. When the same prayers stop producing results, it exposes how often we rely on routine rather than relationship. Repetition can create comfort, but it can also create stagnation. God is not impressed by familiarity. He responds to alignment. The breakdown of old formulas is an invitation to shift from habit-driven faith to spirit-led obedience. God is not rejecting your prayers. He is refining how you approach Him. This disruption is uncomfortable because it removes predictability. You knew what to say. You knew how to pray. You knew what steps usually followed, but God is not interested in repeating cycles that no longer stretch you. He is interested in transformation, and transformation requires tension. When old ways stop working, it is often because God is creating hunger for something greater than what you already know. These moments test humility. It is tempting to assume something is wrong with you when results change, but often the opposite is true. God disrupts success just as much as He disrupts failure. He will close doors that once opened easily to prevent you from confusing momentum with mandate. What worked before may now limit you, and God loves you too much to let familiarity replace obedience. This is also how God breaks dependence on methods instead of Him. Strategies can become substitutes for sensitivity. When you know exactly how something will unfold, faith slowly turns into control. By removing the effectiveness of old approaches, God forces you to listen again. He draws you out of autopilot and back into awareness. You can no longer rely on memory. You must rely on discernment. Disruption introduces surrender. You are invited to release what once felt safe and trust God with what feels uncertain. That is not loss. It is transition. God is not tearing down your faith. He is expanding it. The frustration you feel is often the tension between where you are and where God is leading you. The confusion is temporary, but the growth is permanent. This shift also reveals intention. God is not improvising with your life. Every interruption is strategic. Every closed door has direction behind it. When old prayers stop working, it is because new authority is being formed. God is moving you from asking to aligning, from requesting to responding, from seeking answers to becoming the answer. The failure of familiar methods is proof that a new level is unfolding. God is not removing effectiveness. He is redirecting it. What you learned before was necessary, but it is no longer sufficient. A deeper trust, a sharper obedience, and a more responsive faith are being built. What feels like disruption is actually advancement, preparing you for outcomes your old strategies could never sustain. When God begins to speak with greater weight, separation becomes unavoidable. Not because you are better than others, but because you are being prepared for something different. The new clarity in God's voice naturally creates distance between where you are going and where you have been. People who once understood you may no longer recognize you, and environments that once felt familiar may suddenly feel restrictive. This separation is not rejection, it is alignment. Elevation always carries a cost. As God entrusts you with greater responsibility, He also refines your surroundings. Certain relationships cannot go where you are being led because they are tied to past versions of you. Others may resist the change because your growth confronts their comfort. This can feel lonely, but loneliness is often the evidence of transition. God removes noise so you can hear direction clearly. This separation also exposes identity. When external validation fades, you are forced to anchor yourself in purpose rather than approval. You learn who you are when applause is absent and support is limited. God uses this season to detach you from dependence on affirmation and attach you to obedience. What once motivated you may no longer move you because influence now matters more than acceptance. As separation unfolds, discernment sharpens, you begin to recognize what drains you versus what develops you. Conversations change, interests shift, your tolerance for distraction decreases. This is not arrogance, it is focus. God is teaching you to guard what He is growing. Not everyone needs access to your next season, and not every opinion deserves a response. Silence becomes strength, and restraint becomes wisdom. Elevation also demands capacity. The higher the responsibility, the stronger the foundation must be. God separates you so He can strengthen you without interference. In private, He corrects, instructs, and prepares you for public impact. What looks like isolation is often incubation. Growth happens quietly before it is revealed visibly. This season will challenge emotional attachments. You may grieve what no longer fits, even if it once mattered deeply. Letting go can feel like loss, but it is actually release. God is not subtracting from your life. He is creating space for new assignments, new connections, and new influence that match where you are headed. Elevation does not announce itself with fanfare. It shows up as increased responsibility, sharper conviction, and deeper accountability. God speaks with greater weight because He expects consistency, integrity, and follow through. This voice carries trust. God does not place heavy authority on unstable foundations. The separation you experience is proof that stability is being formed. What feels like distance now will later make sense as direction. God is positioning you where your obedience will matter, your influence will count, and your presence will carry impact. Separation is not the end of connection, it is the beginning of clarity. As God elevates you, He surrounds you with what sustains purpose rather than what distracts from it. The weight of His voice is the sign that you are being trusted, refined, and prepared for a level of influence that requires focus, discipline, and unwavering alignment. The reason the voice feels different is not because God has changed, but because you have. You are no longer standing where you once stood, and you are no longer listening with the same heart. Life has taken you through pressure that stripped away illusions, through waiting that tested your faith, and through silence that forced you to confront who you really are. Those seasons were not wasted time, they were preparation. What once would have overwhelmed you now strengthens you, and what once confused you now sharpens your discernment. God speaks according to capacity, and your capacity has expanded. There was a time when you needed reassurance more than direction. You needed to know you were loved, protected, and seen. God spoke gently then, like a teacher repeating the basics until the lesson took root. But maturity changes the tone of instruction. Now, the voice carries weight, urgency, and expectation because you have grown enough to respond without constant explanation. This is not about punishment or pressure, it is about trust. God does not give heavy instructions to unprepared hearts. Pain has been one of your greatest teachers. It taught you what comfort never could through disappointment, betrayal, and unanswered prayers. Something deeper was formed inside you. You learned endurance. You learned restraint. You learned how to stand even when everything familiar collapsed. That is why the voice you hear now does not coddle your emotions. It speaks directly to your spirit because your spirit is finally strong enough to receive it. Waiting also reshaped you. The delays you questioned were quietly building discipline, patience, and obedience. You learned how to move without applause, how to believe without evidence, and how to remain faithful without immediate reward. In those hidden seasons, your ears were being trained. You learned to recognize truth without noise and direction, without drama. That training is the reason God can now speak with clarity and confidence, knowing you will not panic or run at the first sign of uncertainty. Even silence had a purpose. When God seemed quiet, he was not absent. He was allowing you to grow independent of constant confirmation. You learned how to trust his presence without feeling it and follow his will without hearing daily reassurance. Silence strengthens your spiritual hearing. Now, when God speaks, you recognize the authority in the voice because you have learned how rare and valuable it is. The change in God's voice marks a change in your responsibility. You are no longer being prepared, you are being positioned. The instructions are clearer because the expectations are higher. God is not introducing himself to you anymore. He is commissioning you. The voice carries assignment, not introduction. It carries purpose, not persuasion. This is why the message feels deeper, heavier, and more personal. God is speaking to who you have become, not who you used to be. Your growth has unlocked access to revelation you could not have handled before. What sounds unfamiliar is actually evidence of maturity. You are hearing God at a new level because you are standing at a new level, and the voice you hear now matches the strength he has built within you. For a long time, survival was the focus, getting through the day, holding yourself together, managing the weight of responsibilities and disappointments. That was enough. In those seasons, faith was about endurance. Prayer was about relief. You were asking God to help you make it, not realizing he was preparing you to lead it. Survival mode was necessary, but it was never meant to be permanent. There comes a moment when God signals that merely coping is no longer acceptable because purpose is waiting on the other side of obedience. This is the shift into assignment. An assignment is different from survival because it carries intention and direction. Survival reacts to circumstances. Assignment responds to calling. When God begins to speak about purpose, the language changes. He stops addressing only what hurts and starts addressing what must be done. The focus moves from your pain to your position, from your wounds to your responsibility. Not because your pain didn't matter, but because it no longer defines you. In survival mode, you ask God to fix what's broken. In assignment mode, God asks you to build what's missing. This is where many hesitate because building requires strength, vision, and accountability. It is easier to pray for rescue than to accept responsibility. But God does not elevate people who only want relief. He entrusts those willing to carry weight. The calling on your life demands more than emotional healing. It demands action. This transition can feel overwhelming at first. You may still feel tired, still healing, still unsure, but assignment does not wait for perfect conditions. God calls you forward with the strength you have, not the strength you wish you had. The confidence comes after the obedience, not before it. That is why God speaks with urgency in this season, because waiting for comfort will keep you from purpose. Assignment also changes how you see yourself. You stop identifying as someone trying to get by and start recognizing yourself as someone sent. Your prayers change from God help me to God use me. Your mindset shifts from preservation to impact. You begin to realize that what you survived was not random, it was training. Every challenge sharpened discernment, every loss deepened compassion, and every delay strengthened resilience. Nothing was wasted. When God moves you into assignment, He also grants authority. Authority does not come from position, it comes from obedience. You carry weight not because of a title, but because you have walked through fire and still listen. God trusts those who remained faithful in obscurity to influence others in visibility. The season of assignment is not about spotlight, it is about service with purpose. This calling demands consistency. Survival allows you to rest in cycles. Assignment requires forward motion. God is not asking you to do everything. He is asking you to do what you were sent to do. Clarity replaces chaos when you accept that your life is no longer about merely making it through. You are here to make a difference, to stand in the gap, and to move with intention. What once felt like endurance now becomes direction, and what once drained you now drives you, because you are no longer surviving, you are responding to a divine assignment. There comes a point in the journey where comfort is no longer enough. Comfort soothes, but it does not move destiny forward. For a long time, God spoke in ways that calmed your fears and steadied your emotions because you needed to survive what you were going through. You needed reassurance that you would make it, that you were not abandoned, that your pain had meaning. But seasons change, and when purpose begins to rise, the tone of God's voice changes with it. What once felt like gentle encouragement now sounds like firm direction, because God is no longer keeping you afloat. He is calling you forward. This shift from comfort to command can feel unsettling. Commands remove options. Comfort allows space for hesitation, but command demands response. God is not asking how you feel about the instruction. He is revealing what must be done. This is not harshness. It is clarity. When God speaks with authority, it is because delay would cost you something. The urgency in the voice is not pressure. It is protection from staying too long in a place you've already outgrown. In earlier seasons, God explained more because explanation built trust. Now, trust has already been established, so explanation is no longer necessary. Obedience has become the language of relationship. You are being trusted to move without needing every detail because faith has matured beyond emotional dependence. The command comes not because God is distant, but because He is confident in what He has developed inside you. This kind of voice exposes fear quickly. Comfort allows fear to hide, but command forces it into the open. When God speaks decisively, every excuse becomes visible. Every hesitation is revealed, not to shame you, but to free you. God is stripping away the internal negotiations that keep you circling the same mountain. He is saying, you know enough now. You've prayed enough now. It's time to move. The command also brings alignment. Comfort can make you feel good while staying misaligned, but command realigns your actions with your calling. It sharpens focus. It narrows distractions. It pulls you out of emotional reasoning and into spiritual responsibility. God is not managing your feelings in this season. He is shaping your future. This shift requires courage because command often comes without immediate reward. There is no applause attached to obedience at this level, no instant confirmation, just the quiet certainty that God has spoken and your response matters. That is why this voice feels heavier. It carries consequence, it carries weight, it carries assignment. When God moves from comfort to command, it is a sign that you are no longer being carried, you are being trusted. The voice now expects follow through, consistency, and action. You are no longer learning whether God can be trusted. God is revealing that He trusts you. There is a kind of obedience that feels safe because it comes with explanations, timelines, and guarantees. But that is not the obedience required in this season. God is now asking you to move without having every detail clarified, to trust without seeing the full picture, and to act without knowing how everything will unfold. This can be deeply uncomfortable, especially for those who value understanding and preparation. Yet faith at this level is not about clarity, it is about alignment. God often withholds full explanations, not to confuse you, but to protect the process. If you knew every step, you would be tempted to control what must be surrendered. If you had the full map, you might rush ahead or hesitate out of fear. Partial instruction keeps you dependent on His voice rather than your own logic. God is not testing your intelligence, He is developing your trust. Obedience without clarity strips away negotiation. You can no longer bargain, delay, or adjust the instruction to fit your comfort. You either move or you don't. This is where faith becomes visible. Belief is internal, but obedience is measurable. God is not looking for agreement, He is looking for action. When you move without full understanding, you demonstrate that His authority matters more than your certainty. This type of obedience also reshapes your priorities. When answers are limited, listening becomes essential. You begin to pay closer attention to direction instead of outcomes. You stop obsessing over results and focus on response. The question shifts from, will this work, to, did God say it? That shift is powerful because it removes pressure to predict and places responsibility on obedience alone. There is also a refinement that happens here. Obedience without clarity exposes motives. If you only obey when outcomes benefit you, then obedience is conditional. But when you obey without knowing the reward, obedience becomes worship. God reveals deeper layers of the heart in these moments, purifying intention and strengthening integrity. This season teaches patience in motion. You are not standing still, but you are also not rushing ahead. You move step by step, guided rather than driven. God releases just enough light for the next step, not the entire journey. This keeps you humble and attentive. Each step requires renewed trust, reinforcing dependence on God rather than on plans. Fear often speaks loudly in seasons without clarity. It questions timing, capability, and consequence. But obedience quiets fear by shifting focus. You may not know how everything will work out, but you know who spoke. Confidence does not come from information, it comes from relationship. The more you obey, the more familiar the voice becomes. And familiarity builds peace even when circumstances remain uncertain. Obedience without clarity positions you for growth you cannot achieve through understanding alone. It develops spiritual resilience, sharpens discernment, and strengthens courage. God is not withholding clarity as punishment. He is offering an invitation into deeper trust. Each step taken without full explanation expands your capacity to follow, to lead, and to carry responsibility. This is the obedience that matures faith from knowledge into conviction, training you to move by trust rather than by sight.